Hey guys, John here with the Practical Tactical Minimalist. I'm compiling my thoughts and really letting the information settle in from a class I took yesterday at Frontsight Solutions Range. They hosted Jim Dexter of Tactically Sound Training, and Jim put on his Introduction to Defensive Red Dot class. It was 8 hours and it ran from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. on September 22nd, 2019. If it's not raining, it's not training. I'm sure you've all heard that saying before. So apparently this is my first class. Every other class I've taken, around 55 hours last year and like 20 hours plus or minus this year. It was in absolutely gorgeous weather. I even took a rifle class in January that just so happened to be the hottest day on record or something like that. It was like mid-50s and sunny. So most of the morning the rain held off or it sprinkled, but then by the final test and one other time during the day, it was like a monsoon. I had about an hour drive home, and by the time I got home and changed, my jeans were still dripping wet. So just to put that into perspective, that's the type of training day we had for Introduction to Defensive Red Dot. So here is the structure of the class. I, again, will not be giving away any of the awesome sauce or specifics, as my intention is not for you to try to back engineer the class yourself. My intention is just to encourage you to train, and a big obstacle to people going out and getting training is that they just have no frame of reference of what it will be like. So I find that these structure portions are very important. Plus, as I've stated a bunch on this channel, this channel started out as like a personal training journal sort of thing to keep me accountable and keep me training, and also so I have a record of my classes, my progress, etc. The class started and we went over introductions and then jumped right into the main and only lecture portion of the class. Jim really broke down the mechanical idea of red dots on handguns and how they work. He gave an overview of red dots on the market, like all of them, and told us the data of how they fare long term in his data set. Then he went into the myths and the solutions to the legit problems that red dots face. Jim has a bit on moisture and red dots, where he induces moisture into the red dots, the optics for students, so that they can learn how to work through it, dispelling the fog and rain myths. But he was able to cut that portion out of the class because, well, nature gave us the experience naturally, and we were able to save some time on that. Shockingly, out of the 16 students and the instructor, obviously, we didn't have a single red dot issue that arose, and no electronics exploded and killed us all in a tragic accident. We were able to find and hit the targets reliably, and while the rain was not, should I say, fun? The rain was not fun. It did not cause our gear to go down. I wrote a note in my book about gel pens. I knew it was going to rain, so I brought my Write in the Rain notebook, but I still brought a Pilot G2 because I was not thinking about it, and that was not a good idea. So as you can see from the photos, a lot of my info was smeared or completely wiped away. I like to take notes of the drills so I remember them and their purpose and can recreate them in the future. The last drill, it was raining so hard I didn't even try to write it down. So after that lecture and introductions, which was very in-depth and probably took about an hour, we went live on the range for the rest of the day. The first drill was started out cold and was a simple draw to A zone at 7 yards type drill. He gave us pointers on finding the dot. My final time was 1:85 clean. Then we did some dot tracking work where he could diagnose what was going on with our grip, recoil management, trigger press, etc. by using the red dot as a training aid in some controlled recklessness to find our inconsistencies and or the problems that we could spend the rest of the day working on. Then we went back to the 10-yard line and zeroed our weapons as a group. I had a 25-yard zero on my gun and I just left it as is. A few guys had just put on their red dots the night before, so there was some real work to do. Once we were all satisfied with our zeros, we started the real work of the day. The first drill was on a Bear Solutions target, and we did the 5x5x3. It was 5 yards, 5 rounds to one box, 5 rounds to the other box, reload, 3 rounds to the little middle circle. The par time was 10 seconds. My score was 8-4-1 clean. So I should probably explain what I mean by my time. All the drills were done as a group with no time limit at our own pace. Then we did it as a group timed, but it was the group that was timed. Then we went down the line and individually were timed with Jim watching. I absolutely loved this setup. It slowly ratcheted up the tension and pressure as your understanding of the drill also increased. So by the time he got to you, you felt very comfortable with the drill, but you also had some legitimate social pressure to perform under. The first drill we did was the first time I've been a little bit shaky in several classes, so that was huge. I loved the setup. He also only puts time pressure on with the buzzer because if you aren't tracking your progress, you aren't making any measurable improvement to your skills. The times were all pretty lax, and if you did go over time, he didn't care. He just wanted you to finish the drill out, no worries, do it to the best of your ability. The timer was just for frame of reference for getting better. He reiterated several times the only person you are trying to compete with is your own last score, so be better than yourself at the beginning of the class, and I think it worked out great. After that, we had lunch for about 30 minutes. While we reloaded, I chugged some water and we were back to working. Jim brought up the fact that with red dots, in order to get the true benefit of them, we need to just trust the dot and look through the window and target focus. If done correctly, the body and the hood should kind of like phase away, and you really only remember seeing the target with the dot superimposed on it if you're threat focusing right. Most of us thought we were threat focusing. I thought I was threat focusing, but I was really doing something weird. I would like threat focus, see the dot floating on the target, and it's hard to explain, but you don't even really see the optic or the gun. And then right before or after sometimes I cracked the shot, I would shift my focus back to the dot to confirm its placement and then go back to threat focusing. The drill Jim had us do was ingenious because your partner or him, if he was watching you, they would see the stutter on target if it was even only like a quarter of a second because you're stuttering as you're trying to find that dot again. And in about 15 minutes of group drills, everyone on the line, you could tell, had that light bulb moment go off in their heads. And we were like, oh shit, I didn't even realize I was doing that. The drill he was using was something I've already tried again in dry fire last night because I just thought it was super valuable. Then we got rained out for a bit, so we took a chat break until the intensity of the rain slowed back down. Then we went back out to the training. We then did a bunch of work on finding the dot and how to relearn and unlearn bad press out habits that we've all adopted from iron sights. The more time you have on iron sights, the more time you've kind of gamed the system to compensate for a bad draw. And with iron sights, you really don't see that, but with a red dot, that can be huge. So that's one of the reasons red dots are so beneficial for dry fire and for getting better. If you get a lot better with a red dot, you tend to find yourself being a lot better with iron sights as well. It's because there's much more margin for error and you see it. So we did a bunch of work on finding the dot and learning how to do a correct press out. Then we redid our first drill, draw the first shot, 7 yards. My final time on this one was 1:29 clean. Mind you, this has been less than half a day of training, a few hours, and Jim had already chopped off 0.6 seconds off my time, which I found very impressive. The next drill was a 5x5x5, 5 rounds, 5 seconds, 5 yards. My final time was 3:07. And then we worked on our next drill, which was introducing a bit of distance. 10 yards amplifies any of the problems that you could be gaming away up close. So we did like a micro little bill drill. It was 10 yards. He calls it the 10 yards by 3-way. It's 10 yards, 10 rounds, 10 seconds into the black on a B8. My final time on that one was 7:91 clean. At this point, we all had learned at least, half a dozen things. So Jim used Steve Fisher's basic cascading diamonds drill, but he changed up a few things to make it unique to what Jim was trying to get us to accomplish. We were really working on merging all of this new technique with good old-fashioned trigger control and throttle control, and it was definitely stacking difficulties, trying to remain threat-focused, keep a good trigger press, high and tight on the grip with adequate pressure, etc. Me and my partner Mike passed it clean the first mag, which was rad. And then at this point, we were going to do a little work at 25 to wrap up the day, but the weather radar was already showing the monsoon about to hit, so we rushed into the final qual. Unfortunately, we still got pelted with rain. Jim shouted over the rain at the beginning, hey, if you guys paid me to be here, so you don't have to stay out here. I'll finish up the drills, but if you want, I'll play through, but if you want to go back undercover, you can bail. All 16 of us stayed and finished out the class. The time was all achievable, but it wasn't designed to crush people. If you'd been paying attention through the class, you'd probably pass. However, it did require you to apply the new things you had learned and really follow through and do it well. So it was achievable, but it wasn't easy, so that was nice. So that's the basic overview of the class. At the end of the class, we did the normal after-action report and chatted with Jim about what we really took away from the class. I mentioned number 1, but I really have about 3 main things that I really gleaned from this class that make it worth the price of admission. Number 1 was aggressive movement. When we learn how to draw either from old instructional videos, DVDs, YouTuber beginner videos, or from local gun range old timers, there's the generic 3-step draw. You can always tell a new shooter based on how robotic their draw is because you can see the 3 steps. I spent so much time smoothing out that draw that I was wasting precious time smoothly going to retrieve the firearm from the holster, aggressively get that hand on the gun, move fast, aggressively get that gun out, aggressively mate your support hand, then smooth out and throttle down for precision as you are acquiring the dot. Jim shaved off over half a second of my time just by getting me to the gun faster. He said something along the lines of, if I was in a gunfight and I took that, and it was going to take 1 second, right? Most gunfights are over extraordinarily fast. How much time do you want to spend smoothly getting that gun into the fight, right? That really sunk in for me. I need to work on it still a lot, obviously, but I'm sure I can get it down from this point, and I was thrilled to be down below 1.5, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with 1.29 after one class. So I really took that away, and I'm going to be working on that. Number 2 was let the dot do the work for you. So much time is saved by trusting the dot. The parallax is almost non-existent, practically speaking, of course, at handgun distances, and so much of my mental power was spent on reconfirming the dot placement without even realizing it. Jim's reading drill really helped me try to break that habit, and just like levels class really caused me to smooth out my trigger pull and to stop pinning the trigger, the main thing I've been working on from this class already is not over-confirming the dot and letting the dot do the work for me. It's really huge. And number 3, iron sights fail. I've been in around 10 classes at this point. I've only seen 2 gun malfunctions where a gun goes down hard, and both of them were front sights. At the John level Pistol 1 class, we had a front sight fall off because it wasn't Loctited properly. And then at a Front Sight Solutions class, I think it was a workshop, we had an XD sight break off somehow. We weren't doing any manipulations or anything rough, just lost a front sight. In my almost 5 years of carrying at this point, I have never been trapped in weather like we were during that class, and not a single optic failed, not even the Vortex. I never really worried much about the RMR because of its reputation, but I have had 2 Holosuns on rifles go down in the past, so it's always been kind of in the back of my head, like, when's my optic gonna fail? So, do I recommend this class? Did you watch the video? I think that this was Jim's first open enrollment class that he offered, and it sold out in like 24 hours. I've been badgering him since I took TECC to offer it, and I hope he offers it a lot in the future. I'd honestly take it again in a year or so, just to see how much stuff I actually retained. If you are local to the Chicagoland specifically or Midwest area, I know he travels, and you see him putting on a class, definitely take it. It will prevent so many bad habits by nipping them in the bud and starting off with a proper fundamental from the get-go. If Jim doesn't have a class near you, come to Front Sight Solutions. I think that this is honestly my new home range. I've been here 3 or 4 times in the past year, and every time I leave happy with my experience. I went to an indoor range a few months ago just to sight in a red dot, an optic, and the entire time I felt like, 1, it's an absolute waste of money to stand still in a stall plinking at paper 5 yards away. 2, it's horribly overpriced. 3, you're surrounded by FUDs. 4, kind of like 3, you're surrounded by FUDs doing stupid-ass shit constantly that's dangerous. And 5, it's loud, and regardless of the filtration system, you are in such close proximity to such a volume of lead and carbon, it just honestly can't be that good for you. So I dry fire constantly, daily, but I only shoot a few times a year live fire, and when I do, I shoot hundreds of rounds at a time. I can't see myself going to the range often when I can go to Front Sight Solutions every month or so and take an awesome class or a workshop and leave feeling like I'm better than when I got there. I never leave the range feeling like I'm better than when I got there. Every time I leave Front Sight Solutions, I feel like I'm better than when I got there. So buy one less gun in 2020 and go get some training under a watchful eye of a competent instructor. This has been John, the Practical Tactical Minimalist. Be safe out there.